We have very interesting music spotlight for you today. I'm going to be talking to Brian Kasher, and a little bit later on, we're going to be hearing some music from Si Kahn, and they have put together a presentation. It's called No to HB2, the EP Video Suite. And Brian is the producer and kind of heading up the project along with Si Kahn. And obviously, this has to do with House Bill 2, which is known as Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, which has garnered quite a bit of controversy, not only statewide but nationally as well. And invitations have been extended to the other side of this discussion. We'll see if we get anything back on that. I'll be glad to share that side as well. Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here and talking about this.
Hey, thanks for having us.
This whole thing got me, and I'm going to say probably most people, kind of by surprise. This thing was signed after about 12 hours of deliberation. It was signed on the 23rd of March, and I would venture to say that almost day by day there has been headlines somewhere about House Bill 2.
You're absolutely right. Many of the provisions of House B2 were discussed in committee during the regular General Assembly session. However, they couldn't get out of committee. They couldn't get passed in the General Assembly. So they did meet in special session, spent about $45,000 of public funds to come together in a special session in one day. And the bill was released that morning. They had very minimal deliberation and passed this sweeping act that we know the bathroom provisions, but it affects all employees. All people of North Carolina have actually had rights taken away from us and our local governments as a result of HB2.
I'm glad you brought that up. The issue that seems to be in the spotlight has to do with the bathroom issue, notwithstanding that being an important issue. But as you just mentioned, this affects lots and lots of people besides the transgender community. And I also wanted to mention it was a unanimous vote, but that was because the Democrats on the Senate side of General Assembly walked out in protest. So there was no votes from the Democrats.
Absolutely. I was monitoring. Senator Jeff Jackson was in real time sending out information on Facebook when the bill came out that even the senators themselves did not have time or were not allowed the courtesy to review the bill or have any input whatsoever in its crafting. It came out lock, stock, and barrel and was passed as is with, again, little discussion and certainly no public input.
Well, Brian, if you would, talk a little bit about some of these other issues that you referred to in regards to loss of rights for our citizens in North Carolina.
Actually, Part 2 of the bill, referred to as statewide consistency in laws related to employment and contracting, which is on page 3 of the bill. I thought it was very interesting that the short title of the bill is, quote unquote, local governments preempted. I thought it was very telling that the General Assembly, at least the majority in the General Assembly at this point, would actually title something specifically calling out that the legislative purpose itself was to preempt local governments having authority in the areas of wage discrimination and discrimination in general, whether it be discrimination against Christians or veterans or women, whoever the discrimination is against. They actually went in and didn't just address the issue that we're all talking about, which is the ordinance of the transgender issue for Charlotte, but they went much further and they did a sweeping change to the law that prohibits, for instance, local governments from establishing their own minimum wage. Of course, the argument against that is to be competitive. We can't have Gaston County having a minimum wage and Mecklenburg County having a different minimum wage, and it gets confusing for business and businesses who want to come in. However, conversely, having the freedom to set up minimum wages, a lot of folks think makes sense because, for instance, whereas it may cost, let's say, just for discussion, $35,000 a year to be able to get by in Mecklenburg County. If we're out in the western portion of the state, away from the city, you might be able to get by on $20,000 a year.
The cost of living is much less.
The cost of living is much less. So the idea of having one minimum wage that's mandated by the state across all counties, across all sectors, which is what this law has now done, it ties our hands. We have to expect folks to pay out in the western part of the state or wherever it happens to be to pay the same minimum wage that folks are expected to pay and live on in Charlotte or here in Gaston County, for instance. So it's a big deal. And it goes much beyond that, which is getting all the attention. And Si and I focused on transgender rights and those issues as well with our production.
Did this come about right as this was evolving?
It really did. Si and I had worked on a project called With Music and Justice for All, which is a concert where Frigolard comes out and he reads excerpts from his 20 books about Southern life and about activism in the South and the struggles that happened here in the South. And Annie DeChant comes out and sings songs, and Si also got involved with singing songs about the movement and changing times and what have you. So we did that project together, and then this happened. Si's like, hey, we've got this song. I've got one song called Oy Vey, which we also produced. But then he came up with this suite. Just amazing the energy this guy has, too. Let me tell you something. This Si's brain, it's since he was a little kid, he's been writing songs. And these songs just started coming out, and we decided, hey, let's get together. We actually discussed doing one song. And before we were through, there was 5 produced songs and videos with this video EP project.
We got to do something with this.
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, let's get one on from Si here. Which one would you like to start off with, Brian?
Why don't we start out with Who's in the Bathroom with Me? This is a really moving song that Si, again, came up with. Just to set it up for folks, if you visit the Facebook page, which is No to HB2, you'll see that the visuals are actually the 54 people who were arrested in the State House. As they're being arrested, Dr. Barber's videographer allowed me to get stills from his video of the people actually being arrested. So all the visuals to this are Si playing and singing the song, which you'll hear, but it's also the 54 people being arrested and taken out, some carried out by police in Raleigh.
Very emotional issue here in North Carolina, and as we see across this country for sure. My guest today is Brian Cash. We're also going to be featuring the music of Si Kahn. This is entitled Who's in the Bathroom with Me? On the Roundtable Sunday edition, Music Spotlight.
Oh dear, what can the matter be? Who's that? Here in the lavatory, I don't know what their story is. Who's in the bathroom with me? She looks just like a woman, but what if she's only fooling and she was actually born a he? Who's in the bathroom with me? He looks just like a man, but can he pee standing up easily? What if he really is a she? Who's in the bathroom with me? She looks just like my sister, but what if she is a mister and I just saw a boy kiss her? Who's in the bathroom with me? If he's really Bozo the Clown, why does he pee sitting down? At least he won't spray the seat all around. Who's in the bathroom with me? Gee, gosh, what can the matter is? It's all nobody else's biz. Oh dear, I sure need to take a whiz. Don't care who else has to pee or who's in the bathroom with me.
Thanks for rejoining us at 91.7 WSG. This is the Music Spotlight. That was Si Kahn, and we are talking about HB2. You probably got that from the song. And I also have Brian Casher along, and we're discussing a music and video project that Brian and Si have put together as it relates to House Bill 2. Brian, I thought we would go in a direction of really talking about probably some of the most hot-button aspects of this, which comes from a portion of the church community. Your thoughts?
Many people in the state are citing homosexuality as a abomination before the Lord. There's a little bit of cherry picking there. When it comes to discrimination, the founding fathers in our Constitution certainly do not say we are all equal among equals as long as we look and think like each other. Mm-hmm. That's just not how it is. That's not how our legal system works. When we get into biblical doctrine, the word abomination is what a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters will point to homosexuality and this whole issue as being a negative. The fact of the matter is abomination is used in about 23 different ways in the Bible. And people really need to think that if they're going to raise this issue to the height that they have, to where we have to pass laws and we have to change rights, they really need to be careful, because there's so many other things that are described as an abomination by our Lord in the Bible.
To pick up on that, Brian, and certainly I don't want to go too far theologically, because I'm certainly no theologian, but I certainly have done my share of reading and my share of worshiping and all of that. I think certainly if we're going to look at Jesus of Nazareth in regards to the toleration that he had in regards to people of all stripes, period, in his day, it seems logical to me that you could apply that 2,000 years later.
Absolutely. And I think that's a message that their religion has become very political. At least one part of our religious community has become extremely political, and it has a very strong political ideology. And Jesus, for me, was not a political person, did not tell me to get engaged in politics to cure the ills of the world, whatever those might be. He instructs me, and I believe others, to share the good word and to help people find their way, not build walls to keep them out, not create laws, not to use legislation as a alternative to the Great Commission. I just don't see that as being the case. To take it just one step deeper, in Deuteronomy, we are instructed to kill our children. If we have kids that talk back or are drunkards, we're instructed to take them out and have the men of the town kill them, stone them to death. If a woman is found not to be a virgin upon marriage, Deuteronomy tells us that woman is to be stoned to death in front of her father's house. I mean, these are very, very strong symbolic messages, teachings that were shared, that have been shared for millennia. And yet our culture is only picking up on one of similar, not exact, but similar type teaching, telling us that we need to separate, we need to have laws to separate homosexuals or people who engage in that activity. And again, from a religious perspective, I say we need to be opening our arms and inviting them into our community.
Brian Kasher, and he, along with Si Kahn, have put together the No to HB2 EP video suite that you can go to Facebook on. You mentioned House Bill 2, which is known as Public Facilities Privacy and Security Act, was passed on March 23rd and became a launching pad for the project that Brian and Si are currently involved in. We're going to be listening to another track from Si Kahn. And by the way, these renditions by Si are done right here at WSGE Studios. Shall we go on, since we were talking a little bit about the politics, interacting with religion, Christianity specifically, and do a tune called The Old Bad Hymn of the Republicans? Talk a little bit about that, Brian.
Okay, so it's based on the tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Si really has a way of using wit and verse to get his points across. And I think in this, we kind of stripped back down on the video and we went with simply Si singing. It's kind of stripped back, but it really hits home in terms of just what exactly is going on with our legislature.
Very good. Again, Brian Kasher, my guest today. Si Kahn featured as our music guest here on the Roundtable's Music Spotlight. And this is Si Kahn doing The Old Bad Hymn of the Republicans on 91.7 WSGE.
We heard it back in history, now we're hearing it again. We must protect our daughters and our women from those men. They didn't mean all men, just those who didn't look like them. Could this still happen now? They said in the name of liberty, we must protect our rights. They apply to every person as long as they are white. And if some disobey, we'll just go riding through the night. Could this still happen now? Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Could this still happen now? You'd think that after all these years some sanity would prevail. Turning people into scapegoats wouldn't be some holy grail. How can we trust such leaders when consistently they fail? Could this still happen now? Now our ambitious governor revives the need to fight. He targets decent people and denies them freedom's light. He's riding roughshod through the day as well as through the night. Could this still happen now? Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Glory, glory, Pat McCrory. Could this still happen now? I myself am Jewish, but I truly do believe that Jesus had it right about the very least of these. And what you do to them, well, you just done it unto me. Could this still happen now? Every one of us has people that we wish would disappear, and beliefs we know are wrong we still hold on to dear. Can we heed our better nature, not give in to hate and fear? This could happen now. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. This can happen now.
Thanks for rejoining us here at 91.7 WSG. A little bit of a twist today on our Music Spotlight. This is music with a theme, and actually a hot button theme at that. We're talking about the HB2, that's House Bill 2. It has made headlines since late March of this year, not only statewide but nationally. And just as a fair disclosure, folks on the other side of this discussion have been invited. We'll see if we can get them on as well to discuss their side of House Bill 2. Brian, I wanted to make one point that I know that is overtly in the news, and I've seen it subjectively or under the radar in the news, and that is a lot of people, particularly in the Charlotte region, feel as if they've been tricked in regards to our governor, Pat McCrory, who was a longtime mayor here of Charlotte and considered by many, many people as a moderate. I know a lot of Democrats readily voted for Pat McCrory because they felt like he was fair-minded and balanced. And no sooner than he got to the State House in Raleigh, we started seeing a very, very different Pat McCrory, one who really sided with the very furthest conservative political activists of the General Assembly in pushing legislation that was quite a surprise, I think, to a lot of particularly moderates, Democrats and Republicans.
I think you're right there. I've got photographs hanging in my house of Pat holding my daughter when she was a baby.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. We've prayed together and things. And I thought as a mayor, Pat did a pretty good job. But when he ultimately did succeed in becoming governor, there was a huge shift. I mean, the types of legislation that's been passed and just signed immediately by Pat is unbelievable. Rolling back voter rights, for instance. It just boggles the mind. Not expanding Medicaid. I mean, there are statistics out there today that show how many people per day are dying because Medicaid was not expanded.
Simply to oppose Obamacare.
Simply to oppose Obamacare, which is quite the successful program. But sure, Pat did make a change. And I'm not sure if that's because he has national aspirations within the Republican Party or if it was because of the nature of the legislature that was elected with him. But the man changed. I myself have written letters to Pat thanking him for being mayor and telling him, part of the reason we chose to move into the Charlotte region was because of his leadership. But I got to tell you, it's completely changed these days. He's done if not a 180-degree turn, he's done a 90-degree turn, definitely to the right.
No question about it. And again, getting back to a point we kind of scratched on at the very beginning, and that is this whole issue of, with the onslaught of HB2, which is law at this point, unless it's overturned, folks can actually be fired from their job if they are gay. They can be fired, as you mentioned, for any number of minority status situations that they may find themselves in. The headlines have focused on bathrooms. It's really the tip of the iceberg in regards to all of us and the potential loss of rights. Portions of our society are saying, yeah, great, cut this group's rights. But it's a lot more complex than that, isn't it, Brian? Please read down the list here, Brian, of the rights of all of us that are going to be impeded with HB2.
With HB2, we're focusing on transgender rights, but absolutely wage discrimination. No longer do our communities have the right to establish a minimum wage. It's gone. That right has been taken away. Transgender rights. But the McCrory administration in general is rolling back the rights of people around this state. Voting rights, environmental protections have been rolled back. It's becoming easier for polluters to pollute, and our state has less means of doing anything about it. In terms of changing taxes, for instance, I'll tell you what, my taxes went up. It was supposed to be a tax cut. I paid more taxes last year, while our 1% brothers and sisters are paying less these days. Cuts to public education. You want to talk about draconian cuts. I used to work for Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Our school systems are being gutted. Teachers are leaving to go to work in Texas. We're in a race to the bottom with the current direction of the McCrory administration, and I, for the life of me, cannot figure out how Pat went from being a big city mayor who seemed interested in the benefits of all people to going into being our state governor and just completely changing course.
Well, when you talk about the tax, and I'm not a tax expert, but certainly in the last 2 years ago, 2 calendar years ago, the average person who counts a lot on getting a refund based on just their home, you no longer can write off your home mortgage expenses, which is, in my opinion, is unheard of. I've owned a home since the 1980s, and this is the first time in my wife and I's life have we not been able to use our mortgage credit, only for the state, of course. We can do it for the federal, but not for the state.
Let me piggyback on you, one that'll hit home right here at the college. I can no longer write off my college savings in the state 529 plan. So the money I'm putting away for my children, which there used to be a write-off for that, it's gone. I mean, that hits home right here. You would think the government would incentivize people to better our community, better our state by saving for education. And yet there's no incentive now.
And Brian, this is really starting to hit not just what people are saying in the community, but also what high dollar artists are doing and how it's impacting our economy here in regards to not performing in North Carolina. Folks like Bruce Springsteen, Boston, Pearl Jam, Cirque du Soleil, Ringo Starr, Annie DeFranco are just some of the artists of late, just in the last 2 months, who have decided to cancel shows here in our state of North Carolina. In the NBA All-Star Game of 2017, as well as potentially the CIAA tournament, is maybe up for grabs as we go down the road if there's no changes in this particular bill. As we wind down, Brian, we've taken such a large step back. I've been in the state as a resident for 25 years. Really enjoyed my years to be in North Carolina. It's disappointing coming from more of a moderate perspective, moderate left perspective. It's really disappointing to see our state travel down this road.
It is. We've gone from being a fairly progressive state and doing a complete turning around. It seems like the McCrory administration and the state of North Carolina, under the current legislature, is taking steps back. When it comes to state governance, our state is vastly approaching and is just on a trajectory to the bottom of all the major lifestyle living factors that make a state desirable.
We're going to go out again with a couple more from Si Kahn. And again, if you joined us late, my guest today, Brian Kasher, and he, along with Si Kahn, have put together No to HB2. And this...
we call it No to HB2, a video EP suite.
Okay.
And the idea is it's like an EP, but it's a video EP available on Facebook and YouTube. It's free. It's more of an advocacy musical experiment. There's absolutely no intent to make a profit.
Right. This is really just an accompaniment to the emotions, really, that people are facing. How would you like to go out?
Why don't we do HB2?
Good selection, Brian. And let's add for a bonus, Oy vey. And Si's going to do that a cappella style on 91.7.
You can read in the book of Leviticus that a man and a woman made he. But if you can't find your own birth certificate, how do you know just who you should be? So let's say that today is your birthday, as if you were all shiny and new, 'cause you are who you are and we love you. So today we say HB to you. Send back Send back our governor to someplace else. Send back any place other than here. If you met my Uncle Patricia, or some of my mother's great aunts, you'd realize that what makes us different is more than just what's in our pants. For you can't always tell by a hairdo, you can't always tell by a name. So why not resolve all these problems by all of us dressing the same? Send back our governor to someplace else. Send back any place other than here. The theory they call evolution says our species once walked on all fours. So why not just boycott all bathrooms and like our ancestors use the outdoors? Yes, let's follow the teachings of nature with firmness of faith and resolve, and not of our state's legislature who teach us how not to evolve. Send back our governor to someplace else. Send back any place other than here. Harry Golden in the olden days, when civil rights were all the rage, came up with a brilliant plan to ease all the troubles in our land. He observed that when black people stood, whites tended to behave pretty good. But with lunch counters when they sat down, all hell broke loose in every town. So he came up with the Harry Golden rule: remove every chair and stool. If everybody had to stand, there'd be harmony throughout the land. Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? So now our legislature has gone nuts in his preoccupation with our butts, and who's lined up next to whom when they're standing in the you-know-what room. Here's what I think Harry would say: who wants to share a bathroom anyway? So everyone should have their own, a toilet that they can call their own. Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? It's enough to boggle the brain. A Porter John and Porter Jane, a pour to every person in between. Revolution like we have never seen. Don't you think it would really be great? 10 million public toilets in our state, one for you and one for me. This is what it means to be free. Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? So here is what I have to say to our friends in Raleigh today. Go back to defunding the arts. We'll take care of our own private parts. Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say? Oy vey, what would Harry Golden say?